Homo sapiens in Africa. In 1925, a black man working in a mine in Buxton, South Africa, wiped the hot sweat from his head. He shivered, his body reacting to the lime chemicals he had been submerged in for weeks. He stretched out his hands, and leaning his shovel in between his legs, he clapped away the dust that had resided on his fingers, painting them whiter than he had ever remembered seeing them before. His wife would complain if she saw him like this, and tell him to wash the grit out from his nails. He would have if he had expected that he would catch less dirt on them. Wondering for a moment if he and his daughter were alright back home at his village, he pulled his shoulders back and smacked his shovel back into the dirt, kicking the spade in deeper. Leaning into the handle, he reaped the earth from its grave. His eyes grew wide, and his chest tightened as the face of a small child stared back at him. Perhaps showing this to the management might afford him a raise large enough to see his family over the weekend for the first time in months. The twang child handed over to the Raymond dart became the first form of scientific evidence that humans were derived from ape-like ancestors. After the discovery, a series of diverging bone fragments were uncovered in the area now known as the cradle of humankind, the place our ancestors are believed to have congregated. Africa was an abundant place of streams and animals, and an agreeable climate in comparison to some of the harsher and colder landscapes of the time. Africa was the perfect place for creatures to explore and live. Africa during the Pangea was a place considered now to be the Eden from the Bible. These creatures grew, the stronger and wiser individuals being the last to survive during such intense times governed by ever-present carnivores and environmental disturbances. These stronger and reasonably more intelligent individuals banded together and over time evolved to create a new species of hominid. The last of human ancestors is understood to be Homo sapiens, though with today's research in genetics, it's not uncommon to hear of people having partial Neanderthal genes. Despite the coalition of genetic makeup, the first evolutionary groups reported are the San and the Hadza, who are believed to have lived approximately 20,000 years ago. What happened to the rest? There must have been so many Homo sapiens in Africa. How could there only be two groups that were documented? Africa has a rich and fascinating history that is difficult to translate into a set timeline. Exactly how, when and where the groups recognized in society today came to be, we may never know. But the most common consensus is that Homo sapiens, who emerged approximately 200,000 years ago, evolved in Africa from Homo erectus, who emerged approximately 2 million years ago, and then were struck by a heated change in the environment. Where the land was once dry and pliable, it became soft, wet and watery. Homo erectus tried to escape the clutches of their submerged environment but perished. It is believed that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals lost their ancestors' more peaceful natures thanks to the growth of their prefrontal cortexes, which heightened their cognition and made these newly evolved species more territorial and aggressive than those before them. The last of the Homo erectus was believed to have been found in the north of Africa, submerged in the aftermath of an earth collapse. Homo erectus never made it out and became extinct 100,000 years ago. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens never felt the need to migrate beyond Java. They were smaller, more organized and more structured in their planning than Homo erectus. Their new wet environments suited them fine. Despite the similarities in their biology, Homo sapiens had a larger prefrontal cortex, making them more intelligent and violent than the Neanderthals. Though the groups could presumably live in harmony as long as they remained out of one another's way, Homo sapiens possessed one significant ability beyond the rest that ultimately led to the fall of their companions. Homo sapiens possessed the ability to communicate about other groups. Neanderthals could only communicate about resources and things. Neanderthals understood family through memory and instinct. Their amygdala and emotional processing sectors in their brains were large, but not large enough to lead them to destroy the Homo sapiens before they themselves were destroyed. Homo sapiens conducted trade and gossip long before they evolved into the people we know and see today. Language was mainly a series of dialects understood by most Homo sapiens groups within close proximity. This ability allowed them to talk about feeling threatened, ridiculed, or distasteful of the Neanderthals. They captured, killed, fed off, and enslaved their ancestral sibling into extinction. Soon after the fall of the Neanderthals, approximately 40,000 years ago, the land quaked. Pangaea began to separate further, and the environment mirrored its new location. Heat, unlike Homo sapiens had ever known before, crept through the paradise they had once called home. Most of them left, moving eastward through Europe and toward Australasia. Curiosity and dreams of an easier way of life pushing them on. The groups split after leaving Africa, changing resources toward the places they would settle into and become what we know today. Two significant groups stayed behind, growing and evolving into the first reported descendants of Homo sapiens. These were the Hadza and the San people. Both groups drifted through Africa, following the flow of resources. Both were hunter-gatherers at the time and would settle wherever their needs would take them.